Hello, and welcome to Good for Growth's presentation on a disciplined philosophy based on relationships. With me, Dr. Bob Murray. Let's get started. The Ohio chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics has joined with the Cardinal Health Foundation to create Good for Growth, a program to promote childhood development by building strong relationships. The first phase of Good for Growth was aimed at giving pediatricians new skills to help cement the parent-child relationship. Recent research was presented in several areas related to child development, including one of the most challenging, using discipline effectively. Today I'd like to look closely at relationship-based discipline, a whole new way to think about and use discipline to support your child's development. So let's think for a minute. How would you describe your personal philosophy of child discipline? Is it to punish, to foster reflection, to train the child, to teach the child, or to instill a sense of right and wrong? As parents, each of us is different. We have had different life experiences, different childhoods, and different styles of parenting. All of us, as parents, use discipline as a means to change an undesirable or even unsafe behavior, to guide the child toward a different way of behaving, and to build character. But to achieve those goals, parents use very different strategies, which usually reflect how they were disciplined and raised. Some are very strict, using punishment to exert control. Others try to reason with the child and use time out and talk, and still others often end up frustrated, screaming, but without much effect. Which approach works best? If you look in the dictionary, the root word for discipline comes from the Latin term to teach. In this session, we'll look at different style of discipline, one that is founded on parents' or caregivers' relationship with the child, and one that recognizes not only what the child does, but why they do it. Historically, parents have had a few tried and true methods of discipline that tend to remain in use generation after generation, even though researchers often identify problems that arise from using them. There is no question about it. An adult can force a child to stop doing something and act in a different way. Corporal punishment, such as spanking, has an ancient history and continues to be used in the U.S. by some parents. Parents claim it is effective, and yet there are problems. Nearly every child health, psychology, and educational authority, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, strongly discourages this type of discipline because it terrorizes more than it teaches. Yes, the behavior stops, but consider it from the child's point of view. The behavior stops out of fear of the parent. Instead of thinking about their own behavior, the child becomes focused on the parent's behavior. It's parenting by force rather than by teaching. As a result, the relationship is damaged. Over the past 50 years, most child care experts have recommended a form of time out as a means to correct and redirect a child's behavior. In the most common form of time out, the child is briefly isolated from the social life of the family, pressed to think about their behavior, and then welcomed back into the family with words of encouragement to behave in a different way. Attention is the tool used to motivate the child. This is a far more effective teaching tool than spanking or other harsh forms of punishment. Still, is it the best teaching tool we can use? Can we make time out even more effective? To understand how we might improve it, we need to look at what new studies have shown us about the child's brain development. Between a person's birth and age 3, the brain growth is truly staggering. The brain doubles by year 1 and triples by year 3 of life, all of it due to expanding connections between brain cells based on the child's experiences. The brain continues to change and build up connections throughout childhood and adolescence. Not until our mid-20s does the brain finish its development. What a child takes away from their early life experiences will shape everything they do as they age. The first 1,000 days represent a genuine, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to teach. There are two areas of the brain that you need to know about. The first is the midbrain or middle brain, and the second is the front brain, the so-called prefrontal cortex. The midbrain is our emotional center. If you think about a child and their terrible twos, you get the picture right away. The midbrain develops first very early in childhood. This region stirs up emotions of all kinds, including fear and anxiety. Right next to it in the brain center is the brain's stress center. When we feel threatened, fearful, shocked, surprised, or frustrated, the stress center pours out chemical signals to the body, causing a racing heart, rapid breathing, and a feeling of being extra alert and ready for trouble. On the other side is a region that helps us form long-term memories, and those memories help us to understand new experiences. As a child plays, explores, and tries to stretch their boundaries, they learn new skills. They also face stresses every day. When they fall down the stairs and cry, frustrated and angry, it's the midbrain speaking. But each time, using their experience and encoding it into their memory center, they make a record of the event. If the events are traumatic and intensely emotional, or if they are constant day in and day out, the child's brain becomes wired that way. The child becomes a bundle of emotions that are never under good control. What we see when the child feels stressed, even for what seems to be a really insignificant reason, is an explosion from the midbrain. It results in a tantrum. The child is not in control of this. He has no skills or understanding to counterbalance this sudden rush of feelings. He gets swept away and collapses in a heap, screaming with tears and headbanging. The hardest thing for the parent to do at this point is to stop and think. But it's really important to ask yourself, what is my child feeling and why? This is the most important time to use the relationship between parent or caregiver and a child. The goal is to teach the toddler how to override the midbrain, control emotions, and learn how to act differently. How can we do that? First, understand that the front brain, right behind the forehead, is what will take over control from the emotional midbrain. The front brain is slower to develop, and it takes practice to build up its skills. That's our job as parents and caregivers. As a group, the front brain skills are called executive function, meaning that they are traits that help us manage our complex world. From the list of executive functions, you can see how important they are for an adult. These skills are not fully developed until young childhood, so it's something that adults need to scaffold and support throughout childhood, adolescence, and into young adulthood. And it forms the core of a relationship-based discipline strategy. The point of using discipline in early childhood is to practice and perfect front brain control. The goal is not short-term, squelching a single behavior today, but long-term, teaching the child how to control their impulses and instead to weigh their options and choose what's best. Scaffolding these skills is one of the greatest gifts we can give to a young child. What happens during stress? The midbrain emotional center erupts, certainly, but at the same time, so does the stress response center, which is close by. This region pours out what are called stress hormones, like cortisol and adrenaline, that stimulate a fight-or-flight readiness across the whole body. Every day, a child faces a variety of small, normal stresses that challenge and frustrate them. But these are positive stresses that give the child gentle practice in overcoming problems. The problem comes when the stresses are serious, overwhelming, or persistent in the child's life. The stress hormones that help us react to stress become damaging if they remain in the body over long stretches of time. In a fascinating series of experiments, one Canadian research team showed that when baby rats were under stress every day due to being weighed and measured, some mothers would lick and nurture them back to normal, while other mothers did little or nothing to soothe the baby. As they aged, the rat pups who were mothered after stress were normal, adjusted, healthy, and good socially. The highly stressed pups that were not mothered after being stressed became anxious, irritable, antisocial, fearful, and sick. When the researchers swapped mothers, they found that it wasn't a genetic thing, a bond between mother and her own baby. It was an act of mothering itself that made the difference. That finding opened our eyes in pediatrics. If the child's parents can't or won't do the nurturing that it takes to soothe the child after stress and help them build their front brain skills, who else might serve in that role? Grandparents, siblings, child care providers, and in schools, teachers, the bus driver, the lunch lady, lots of us in the community can make a difference. This is what scaffolding can do to put a solid foundation under a child. And that brings us back to discipline. Disciplining a child is a unique chance to practice serve and return. The intention here is not to punish or isolate. In fact, it's the opposite. Using discipline means banking on your relationship with the child to teach them how to think about their behavior and ways that they could act differently in the future. It's a chance to use front brain skills to calm the volcanic emotions of the midbrain. One of the biggest problems with spanking and corporal punishment is that it fires off the midbrain a second time. Not only do we miss an opportunity to practice using the front brain and learn a better way, but we make the stress response fire again, keeping the child emotional, agitated, anxious, and fearful. For the young child, a parent who is screaming down at them, clenching their fists, red-faced and angry, is terrifying. Nothing positive will be learned during that exchange. So how should a parent discipline a child? First, both the parent and the child need to move from an explosive, reactive frame of mind to a more calm and thoughtful frame of mind. Not easy, I know, but this is critical. The child can't learn and the parents can't teach when both are bursting with emotions. This is the time when the child needs that mothering we spoke of. Comforting and soothing the child will not spoil them. It will reinforce for them the idea that your relationship is strong and unbroken. That you want to understand what they're feeling and how to make it easier is the point of this calming behavior. The cool-down step is absolutely necessary, but it doesn't need to be a timeout in the traditional sense. You don't want a break in the relationship that isolates them. Instead, many child experts suggest a time-in approach, that is, create an area in the home or in the classroom designed as the child's personal space, one that's filled with their most comforting things, a blanket, favorite toys, stuffed animals. Here the child can learn to self-soothe, get their emotions under control, and be ready to talk with the parent or caregiver about what happened. Second, ask yourself, why did my child act out? Given his age and development, what should I expect? This is where awareness of development can set our expectations to match the child's level of maturity. Does the temper tantrum mean she's tired, frustrated, needs attention, had a bad day at preschool, is hungry, has had her emotions in all day and can't hold it anymore? Remember that often the child will feel safe to act out at home after being in childcare or school or in the car for a long time. They need to release those emotions and have limited skills in handling them any other way. Third, calm yourself and fix your expression and your voice. Importantly, touch them. Touch tells a child that you're still connected. Tell them what you thought happened and ask them why it happened. Acknowledge their feelings and give those feelings a name. This teaches them to use words to express emotions. And then listen. Stop talking and listen. It's a two-way conversation, not preaching. So the 5 steps are pretty simple and very much tied to the relationship. It's a process that makes the stress response quiet down and then practices front brain skills in their place. Over time, the child will use those skills more and more in place of acting out. Self-calming, self-expression, confidence, and caring for how they treat others all flow from those skills. When serve and return communication is coupled with scaffolding brain development from early in life, the result is a tightly connected parent-child relationship. Being mindful of the child's point of view, how they see the world, their level of maturity, and why they act the way they do, will make the parent more aware of the child's needs. This is the ideal parenting style for building a successful, confident, and resilient child. Discipline experts emphasize that teens need serve and return as much as the young child, maybe even more. The brain is undergoing many changes during this time, including a surge in the growth of the midbrain. So the emotionality, impulsivity, and anxieties all return again. The terrible teens are not the terrible twos, but the results are similar. This is another time when the front brain executive functions have to be nurtured, practiced, and mastered by the adolescents. And it takes time. One tool that can be valuable is negotiation. To the extent possible, allow the teen to negotiate with you about rules and decisions that you make. Let them discuss what they want, let them make their case, offer compromise, and to the extent possible, bend to meet them halfway. Bending is better than breaking the relationship during this challenging time. The teen who feels that the relationship is a two-way street will value your trust and confidence more so than a teen who obeys but feels powerless in the relationship. Here's a simple review that Siegel and Bryson have proposed in their book, No Drama Discipline, to help you be more effective. First of all, reduce the number of words. Listen to the child. Secondly, involve your child in the discipline. Emphasize the positive and be creative as you approach each situation. And finally, remember, our role here is to teach insight and empathy. That is, make the child mindful of their emotional state. I want to say a few words about kids with attention problems and impulsivity. This is a specific area of discipline that requires even more skill on the part of the parent or caregiver. Experts emphasize that these kids have a problem with performance of tasks, not of skill or understanding. So they need even more support and guidance to help the front brain maintain control over the impulsive midbrain signals. The secret is to practice with the child in the home or classroom the kind of behaviors that they will need to use outside in the world. In other words, it's not a case of telling them what you want them to do. Instead, it's a case of practicing situations every day that strengthen their ability to overcome their impulsiveness before they need to use it. This comes through creating daily routines that they can anticipate, establishing limits for their behaviors, providing a clear structure for them to operate within, and making daily life as predictable as possible. Here, too, the relationship is the key to effective discipline. Keep the child tightly integrated in the family. The child's behavior requires a family approach, so making reactions to the child as consistent as possible will greatly improve the impulsive child's sense of expectation. Often we phrase what we ask them to do as a question. Will you go get the trash, Danny? That's polite, but not very effective. Try this. It's time to, or I need you to, giving them an action to do. When possible, give them a choice of doing step 1 first, then step 2, or vice versa. Choices give them a sense of control over their behavior, and it's good for front brain training. For the child with ADHD or impulse control, practice is critical. But the things that they work on need to be kept to a couple things at a time. Breaking an action into small steps allows the child to monitor their progress and not become overwhelmed with details. Working toward a goal is good, but working toward a bribe is not. Several tools have been shown to improve inattention and impulsiveness, including the use of sticky notes, egg timers to prevent having to nag them, text and cell phone alerts. Together with respectful discipline based on the relationships, these routine cues and daily practices can make the child more skilled as they enter the more demanding levels of school. Finally, remember why we use discipline in the first place. It's meant to make a willful, emotional, out-of-control toddler into a highly skilled, socially adjusted, thoughtful child and teen. This calls for more than passive parenting. The best tools that we have to shape the child are our closeness to them, the value of our relationship, our communication style, and our expressions of love that they take away throughout everyday moments. So much depends on our learning as parents to do this one thing well. Discipline is the ultimate expression of what Good for Growth is trying to help parents achieve. A strong child that has all the skills needed to reach their greatest potential. For the parent who's willing to make the effort to learn this discipline style, the investment will pay off for their child for life. Thank you for participating in this Good for Growth webinar on discipline. I hope that you'll find it helpful. please look at our other resources on the Good for Growth website. This has been a presentation of Good for Growth, a program brought to you by the Cardinal Health Foundation and the American Academy of Pediatrics, Ohio chapter.